Today's training is importing data into Claritysoft Live. This is an important thing to know how to do, especially if you're just getting started with setting up your Claritysoft and you have data that you're bringing in from either another CRM or multiple spreadsheets or Outlook contacts, all those different places where you can bring data in. Basically, if you can get your data into Excel format, then we can get it into Claritysoft. So sometimes the trick is getting it into Excel format. So today we're going to cover importing some accounts and contacts and some activities so you can walk through the process and see how that's going to do. So let me go to my agenda here. So we'll do an account import, a contact import, and an activity import. And I'm basically starting with an empty database. I think I just put one record in. One of the things I did want to touch base on a little bit and I will do this really as we work to the tips and best practices. When you're importing data, number one, you want your data that you're bringing in to be as clean and as accurate as possible. And sometimes this is not fun to look at a spreadsheet that has come from somewhere else and see that, oh my goodness, there's a lot of missing data, a lot of incomplete data, or data that's in the wrong column, all kinds of things like that. And it sometimes can become a bit of a daunting task to clean that up. And so, however, we highly recommend that you do it. Now, this data here is very clean, okay? It's not 100% complete because you can see that there's missing information in the status column, there's missing information in lead sources, which that's okay. Where you want your main thrust to be is getting company names in and all accurate and spelled the same, because if you have multiple contacts at the same company, you want the company name to be spelled exactly the same way. Otherwise, you're going to get different accounts being created with the different contacts at those different accounts. So this is very important. And if you're coming from Outlook contacts, my suggestion is to export them out to Excel, and it will create a CSV file, and then you can save it as an XLSX file. And once you've imported it out, the format that it's in the Outlook export is perfectly fine for bringing into Claritysoft, however you want to look at your data. So I usually recommend that you sort the list by the company name field, and maybe sort secondary level by the contact first or last name. That will put all of your accounts together so that you might see that, oh, okay, maybe what you've got here, you might have A.H. Bello Corporation, and then you have A.H. Bello Corp. To the computer, that's two different companies because it's spelled differently. So then what you can do is decide, well, which is the one that I want, and just copy it down to fill it in. So that's the kind of thing that you want to do, the data cleanup that you want to look at. So that's sort of the first one. If you have rows of, maybe personal people that you don't want, you can delete them. So it's just a good idea to go down through and check everything. Then you basically want to do the same thing with your contacts. Perhaps you've got the same person in there. One is Patrick Campbell, one is Pat Campbell. Again, to the computer, two different people, but they're the same person. So you just want to look for those kinds of things. Also, when you're importing into Claritysoft, the contact name needs to be split into all its parts. So it needs to have first name, last name, if you have a middle name or initial. If you have a prefix like Mr., Ms., Mrs., that needs to be in a separate column or in a suffix. So, and sometimes when especially if maybe you're working in a spreadsheet rather than another database, your contact name has first and last name in the same field. This will not come in, okay? This is the format that it has to be. So, and there are some techniques in Excel for splitting names. If you're familiar with it, there's a text to columns technique. We're not really going to go into that today, but you can select, you put insert some blank columns, and then you go to your data menu and you go to text to columns and you walk through the wizard there. There's help in Excel for doing that. It's a great feature, worth learning, worth practicing with if you're doing some data cleanup, because it certainly saves you retyping all of these. It kicks them out into separate columns very quickly and easily, and then you probably still have to do some fixing and cleaning up, but it's not the same as starting from scratch. So those are the things to look for. The other thing that needs to be separated are the street address, where you need to have your street address. If you have like a suite number or a PO box or something like that, that can go in address too. Not that crucial if they're in the same field, although it possibly could go beyond the maximum number of characters that you're allowed in a field, so you need to check that. And then your city, state, and zip code all need to be separate. And I know, I'm pretty sure with QuickBooks, if you're exporting a customer list from QuickBooks, it puts the whole address all together in one field, and I don't think you can export it separately. So that for sure is a cleanup that you would need to do before you could import it into Claritysoft. So those are some little things you must do in order to bring it in. Then also to help you in Claritysoft, we do have it on the support portal. If you go into your Claritysoft and you go to the question mark and go to support portal and then import, you'll see CS Live import records. This will give you the templates for the different modules. So you can open up a template in Excel and that will show you the fields and the way that the data needs to be laid out. So here are the fields for a contact import. So for even with a contact, you will need the account name or the company name. If you're using the site field for the account, you need that. And then you've got all your name parts. Salutation field, if you've been in previous webinars, this is for a nickname to be put in, or if the first name is, the same, you can put the first name into that field. And then their job title, whether they're a primary contact or not, this is going to be a true or false. Whether they want to opt out of email, if you know that going in, you can put true or false. And then their email address. The order of the columns here does not matter. So like I said, if you're exporting from another CRM or from Outlook or just have general spreadsheets, your column order for the fields does not have to match this. The only thing that has to be done is the structure is laid out right. Also, the column headings do not need to match necessarily. It just makes it a little bit easier when you do the import, because the fields will map automatically if they're spelled the same, but you do not have to do that either, okay? So this is a template you can pull up, look at, and make sure that your data fits this type of layout with the names split, the address split, and all of that. So that's there. Also on the help, there is the ability to download our import user guide. This is really helpful from the standpoint, it walks you through the whole process of importing and talks about the templates before you begin, things that you need to know about an import, things that make a record unique so it doesn't think it's a duplicate. This is important to know as well. And then doing the different types of imports. And then the really important part down here is showing you or telling you what the maximum number of characters can be for a particular field. So for example, an account name, the maximum length of an account name is 48 characters. I have run into some that are as high as, 64 or 70. So that means you have to go in and shorten them somehow. So this is important to pay attention to. And I'll show you a little trick in a minute that'll help you know without physically counting the characters for all the rows, to help you know if you have a question about the length of some of the fields, there's a formula that you can put in Excel. And so for each module, you have all the different fields, what their maximum character length is, and then whether it's a required field or not. So in some of the modules, you must have account name, first name, last name, and here you must have a quote number in the quotations. The other fields are optional. So this is very, very helpful. If you have not already downloaded this, I strongly suggest you do it and save it, and then use it kind of as your helper if you're the person doing a lot of the importing. So that's another important one. All right, so let's go back here. This is my Claritysoft. As I said, it's an empty database. I have set up the custom fields. That's your next step that you want to make sure you do. That if in your spreadsheets that you have some data columns that are custom types of fields that you don't have in your database. So for example, I have a product interest field. So I need to go into my Claritysoft and make sure that I add a custom field to capture this data. And what I did do is I made it a drop-down list where you could pick product A or product B. Also, this sector field is a custom field, and this type field is a custom field. So you want to check your spreadsheet, decide, is this data that I want in my database or not want in my database? And then especially if it's multiple names like this, you need to make sure that if you're creating a drop-down or drop-down multi-select type field, that the spelling that you're putting into your Claritysoft drop-down list options is the same as the spelling in here. Okay, and what I usually do to be able to figure that out more easily than scanning down a row, a list of maybe 5,000 records or more, is I will click up here and go to the Data tab and turn on the filter. So you get those little arrows. Then you can click here and see a list of all the options that are in the column. Then you can just duplicate these in your field. So this makes it much easier to be able to do, okay? So look at your spreadsheet, look for custom things. Lead sources is another one. You need to make sure in your lead source field that you have entered all of the options that are listed here, or delete the ones you don't want in here or change them. But you want to make sure you capture all those, because when you do the import, if the importer doesn't find, say, Columbus Trade Show in the lead source list, it's going to kick that record out because there's no matching lead source. Then that's what you don't want to do. Okay, so you just kind of go across. The owner, this is important as well. If you want to have your records assigned to a specific user in your database, you need to have in the owner column the first and last name of your user as spelled in Claritysoft. So again, you need to add all your users to the database first, then make sure that the spelling that you have here matches. Again, if it doesn't, it's going to kick out the record. So, and then your address we already talked about. Again, clean it up. Sometimes people spell out the full state name, like you might see one spelled out Ohio and one OH and one Michigan and one MI. Fix those so that they're all consistent. It just makes it cleaner when it comes in and looks nicer in the database, and it kind of forces people into being consistent. The other one to think about too, because these are all over the map anymore, are phone numbers. Claritysoft does not mask phone numbers or format them in any way in the database. It's just a text field, so it basically will take anything that you type in here. But if you can decide on a format that you like the best for every phone number and make them all fit that format, it just makes, again, for a cleaner look. It also allows you perhaps to do searching. I tend to recommend the hyphens and not the parentheses, mainly because when you're using the parentheses around your phone numbers, you have to use the shift key to get to them, and a lot of people don't like to use the shift key. They just want to type. So either use the hyphens, or the new style seems to be using the dots or the periods for phone numbers. But again, try to be consistent. Take the time to clean that up and make it look nice. It just helps the overall look of your database. And the functionality of your database. So once you've cleaned your data, saved your file, then you get to do the importing. Now the good thing is you can have this spreadsheet open while you're doing the importing. So if there's a question on a field name, you know, maybe you've got a different column heading name than what the field name is, and you can't remember what it is, what it matches to, you can refer to your spreadsheet and say, oh yeah, okay, I remember what that is now, and map it correctly. So I can put this where, you know, off to the side, or minimize and pop it up whenever I want. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the import. So I have added all my custom fields. If I go to settings, and I go to customization and accounts, you'll see I have my product interest, I have my type, and I have my sector. So I've got these set up with the proper choices and set them up. Now, I will bring this up. If you are not an admin user in Claritysoft, then you will not be able to do this type of customization. So it's possible you might, you know, have to talk to somebody about that and become an admin user, or ask the admin user to add the fields that you need. It's also possible with your rights in the database that you cannot do an import. So that's a possibility as well, which again, you'd have to check with your Claritysoft admin person and work that one out. Okay, so I've added my custom fields. I also have some custom fields in contacts, this one especially, this communications list, which is my newsletter, promotional, that sort of thing. So I've got those. I have that all set up and ready to go. So I've prepared my database, I've prepared my spreadsheets, and now I'm ready to do my import. So to do an import, you come up here to this square button. This is called the Tools button, and import is one of the options here. Unless you're not allowed to import, you won't see it. So if you don't see an import button there, that means you don't have the rights to do it. Okay, so then I come to this screen for the data importer, and there's a sequence that you need to follow. With Claritysoft, accounts are the top of the structure in the database. So you need to import accounts first. Then you import contacts. Then after that, you can import any other module, okay? The only module that's totally separate would be leads. You can import into leads first as well, okay? But they're not connected to accounts and contacts. So if you're doing accounts and contacts, you must put the accounts in first, the contacts in second. And as I said before, your accounts and your contacts can be in the same spreadsheet. You just import the fields differently. So I'm going to import my accounts. You're going to create new records to start with. All right, that means it'll just put in brand new records. It would skip any records that might already be in the database that are duplicates, meaning they're spelled the same way. It would skip them and not create a second one. Now, you also have the option after you have imported some data, and maybe you want to update some data. You either added a new custom field, or maybe you updated some options in another custom field, and you don't want to do it manually in the database. You'd like to import it to update it. In that case, you would do create new records and update existing records. then it's not going to skip something that's a duplicate. It's basically going to look at all rows, all records in the database and say, oh, there's a new option here for the status, or there's a new whatever you've put in, and it will update according to the fields that you map. But to start with, you want to create new records only. And then you choose your file. I'm going to use this accounts and contacts one because it has my accounts and contacts in the same spreadsheet so that you can see how this works. If you're coming from Outlook contacts, this is what you would do. You have your accounts and your contacts in the same spreadsheet. If you're coming from another CRM, they may be in separate sheets. So it doesn't matter, but my file here has them all together. So I'm going to use that file. So I choose that. Then it comes up here and says, well, select a worksheet from the file. If you have multiple worksheets in the file, in the workbook, then you can select whichever worksheet is the one you want to import. So you could have 2, 3 worksheets in the same workbook, and you could just import them separately. All right, so over here we have all these little green and yellow and red circle type things. Red means this is an absolutely required field. You must import an account name, which makes sense because you're going into the accounts module or record. So you click here and you look at your list of fields, and I see, okay, here's account name. Now it didn't map automatically because you'll notice over here it has a space and over here it doesn't. So like I said before, it doesn't matter if the account column heading says account, account name, company, company name, just so you know that that's what that's going to go into. It's going to go into the account field in Claritysoft. Then you have address 1 and address 2 were spelled the same, so they automatically mapped. Same with city. I don't, oh wait, I may have country. I honestly don't know. So if you aren't sure, you just go look and see if you have the field. And again, this is when it helps to have the file open because you can go look at the spreadsheet itself. I do not have country. Description is the big text box field that's right beneath the account name in the record. We do not have that. Fax is here. Industrial is a custom field that I don't have. Lead source, I do have, and it happens to be called lead sources. So I map that. Owner is my owner field, okay? Now, if you don't map the owner field, what will occur when you do the import, all the records will automatically be assigned to you. So if it doesn't matter who the owner is, you don't have to have the owner field in your spreadsheet, okay? And they'll just come in, mean mapped to you or assigned to you, and then you can go in and change them later to other users. And then postal code here is called zip code. Product interest is my custom field. Do I have it here? Oh, I know I don't have it because I know why, because I'm using the actually contact list, so no worries. Sector, these are not here. State, status. If you don't want to map a field and you say, no, I don't want to put this one in, you just go to the choose a column and then that will unmap it. So if you have something you don't want to map, you can. All right, so I've got this. I've got everything ready to go, and I click import file, and then it says you're about to do this, so I say yes, and then I say okay. So now I've got, the file is now uploaded, all right? Basically what's happened is all the records that are in the spreadsheet have been uploaded to the server and are waiting to get in to the server, be processed and imported into your database. So what you do is you wait a few seconds and then you click the refresh button. And with any luck, it then says processing. It's now telling me it found 381 records, and so far it's inserted 280 of those. And I wait a few more seconds, and I click refresh. And now it says completed. So here it's saying I imported or I found 381 records. That's how many it processed. It inserted 280, and it updated 0, which is right, and it found validation errors for 101. So this is the thing. Now what's going to happen is you will receive an email from Claritysoft support telling you why it skipped these records. Well, in my case, probably it's because I have multiple contacts at the same company and it found duplicates. So now here we go. So it tells me the name of the file up at the top and the date and the time. It tells me how many records it received, how many it inserted, and how many had errors. So it's not so bad. It's got, these are detected as duplicates. So this is basically all the ones it found it thought were duplicates. And the cool thing is here, it will tell you exactly what row. So at row 3, it thought it was a duplicate. At row 4, it thought it was a duplicate. So if I go back to my spreadsheet, I can go to row 3 and say, yeah, row 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way through 11 are all duplicates of what's in row 2 because I have multiple contacts. So that's what it's doing. It's importing the first one and it's skipping all of these because it only needs one account for 3M Company in New York. And then the next one, so yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are all a duplicate, which is correct. Row 14 is a duplicate, yes, because row 13 is A.H. Bello Corporation and row 14 is the same. So you can see that this is really helpful. Now, if I had had some other error, like the company name was too long, it would tell me that. It would say length validation. And it would tell me that it was 52 characters and the maximum characters are 48. So this log file is really important to receive because it tells you exactly where your problems were, and you can go back to your spreadsheet and fix those problems and then actually run the import again if you want from scratch. So this really helps. So now, actually, I kind of did this in a cool way because I didn't. I'm going to do the contacts next. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to import contacts. And well, before I do that, let me go back to the database so you can see this. So I have my accounts. All my accounts are in here. I've got 3M Company, but with 3M Company, currently I have no contacts, okay, because I haven't imported them yet. But all my companies are here. So that's what we get. We have the 281. I think it was 280. I had one account already in here, so 280 that were brought in. So now I'm going to go back to my importer, and I'm going to select contacts, create new records, choose the file. Luckily, it remembers where your files were, so you go back to the same file. Don't make a mistake and go to the wrong file. Select the worksheet again. Now this time I'm mapping contact information, okay? And notice now we actually have 3 required fields. We must have an account name, which makes sense. Otherwise, how in the world does it know where to put the contact? Then we need to have a first name for the contact. This is why you need them separated, because you can't put the full name in. Then address 1 and 2, we're going to put at the contact level. Here's the communications list. We don't have department, email matched. So now we're getting, see, the contact information. The address stuff is the same, but then we have fields for the contact, which are email and fax. So you can see the data is in the same sheet, but I'm just mapping things differently according to what goes where in which module. Lead source again is lead sources. Middle name, mobile is here. We don't have an opt-out email. Here's owner again. Phone, postal code is zip code. Prefix name, I don't know if I have. No. So I can just choose column. Salutation, what I usually do for salutation, if there's not a separate column for it, is I'll map it to the first name again. Just so you get the information in there. Here I happen to have a salutation column separate. And then if you have used the site field in the account with the account name, then you need to map that, but my database hasn't used that. And then state, suffix name, I don't think I have. Nope. Title, and then these two fields aren't being used. So I've mapped all my fields. Again, you'll see green for where you've made a map. You'll see a yellow where you haven't, and you just want to check that you didn't miss it by accident. If it's not red, then it's not required, it's optional. So I'm going to click Import File, Import Data. Okay. It's uploaded again, and you can see it's actually pretty fast. Now, if you happen to hit somebody out there that's uploading 100,000 records at one time, you might have to wait a while. And you can go off and go back to the database and work. Or you could go send some emails or whatever if you're waiting a long time. And then you just keep clicking the refresh button because it actually goes pretty fast. I mean, this is 300 records, and that's pretty quick. It only takes a few, less than a couple minutes here to do, which is quite impressive. I actually, before this webinar, was doing some importing with someone, and we imported 15,000 records, and it went very quickly. Click processing, completed. Okay, so on this one, it found the 381, it imported 380, and it skipped 1. So I heard the email come in, so let's go look at the email. There it is. So here, row 253, last name null or blank. Okay, so let's go look at row 253 in the spreadsheet. So here's 253. We have Sandeep, and yep, no last name. So here's another thing, part of data cleanup. You could possibly have people in your spreadsheet, your other data lists, wherever they're coming from, with either no first or no last. If you have a missing name, then you need to put something in. So what I usually do is I'll put no last. So if you have one with no first, like if you have one with no first or no last, then that just means there's no contact, unless you find an email address floating around over here. So if you see an email address, sometimes you can figure out what their name is from that. Again, takes a long time to do the cleanup, but people are sloppy. Humans are sloppy in data work, and computers have to be neat. So you do have to have both a first name and a last name, and if you're missing one, then you can put no first or no last in the appropriate column just to fill in the space. Sometimes it's helpful to run sort of a test import, especially if you're starting with a clean database. Now, if you're doing an update, then you're starting with data that's already in there, so you can't really run a test easily. All right, so if I fix that, then I could probably, what would be the easiest is just go put this in manually, and no, I have to type this one in because it skipped it. But that's another little trick that you have to do and pay attention to. So I've now completed my import, okay? And like I said, I'm still missing 101. Well, no, I'm not missing 101 because now when I go back, because they were all duplicates, when I go back to my database and I go to 3M Company, voila, all my contacts. So they're all there, the ones that I had, okay? So that makes it really, really easy. Now I've got all my contacts for my people, and if I go to the contacts module, I will now see there must have been more 3M people down in that list somewhere. It wasn't sorted by company because I think there were only 6 or 7 at the top. But here are my 2 AH Bellow people right here. So you can see that all my contacts have come in and they're associated with the right people. All right. So you need to do your accounts first, then the accounts are there as the placeholder for the contacts. And when you upload your contacts, they're connected to an account. Otherwise, you'll run into issues. So, but I did see the sector and type here were missing because of the spreadsheet that I used. I used the one that had both the accounts and the contacts information in it, which I wanted to show you that you can do. But I have this data in a different sheet. So I'm going to do an update import to show you how that works. So if I come here, go to import, I'm going to choose accounts. This time I'm going to say create new records and update existing records, because it's possible in my new list there might be some new records I don't know. And then I'm going to choose the file that I know has the data in it and the worksheet. And then I'm going to map, okay, and I can choose to map all the fields, but I know that all my address and all this information is already in there, and the only fields that I need to do are the sector and the type and the product. So I can say, nope, don't need to do address, don't need to do this, don't need to do this. I can get rid of all of these because I don't need them, because the data is already in there, okay? So I can just go down here. I want to do product interest because that's what I missed before. I want to do sector. I do not need site. I don't need state, and I just need type, and I don't need website, okay? So you can choose what fields you want to update. Obviously, you have to pick the account name because otherwise it doesn't know where to go. So now I can click import file. Okay. And this time it should do all 381. So there it's doing, okay. Now, I'll get an email for this. It inserted 20, it says, and it got 2 errors. So we'll go figure out what that is once I get the email. There it is. So, oh, it did find something as a duplicate at row 162. And then this one, okay, here's one of those length validation errors. So here, the name of the account is 54 characters long, but it can only be 48. So I would need to go back to the spreadsheet to row 172 and shorten this somehow, like maybe make high school HS to get it down to the right length, okay? So you can see this log file that you get is very helpful to tell you exactly where you had an error and what the error is. Okay, so if I go back now to my database, they're not all filled in, but it did get the ones that it didn't have before or should have. Seems to have only picked up one, so maybe I didn't do something right. But it should do an update for those to fill that information in. So I may have to do that one again. Apologies there. Doesn't always work the way you want it to during a webinar. So anyway, we've got that, but you can do update imports on things. All right, now the other thing, I was going to show you a trick on the length. Let's say this one looks kind of long and some of these others look kind of long down here, but I'm not going to take the time, especially on 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 records to check and count. So you may already know this trick in Excel. If I insert a column, and then I can put a formula equal LEN for length, go over here, choose the cell, and it tells me how many characters are in that account name. And then all I have to do is just fill this down. And then I can look for the ones, I could sort that column from largest to smallest, and I could find the ones that are over the limit, okay? So the only one that we should find is the one that was the Franklin, wherever it was. So here it is, this one right here. It's 54 characters. So that's above the 48 that it needs to be, so I know that I have to fix this. So if I come here and I type HS and press enter, then I can see, okay, I'm good now. It's 45. Okay? So that's a little trick you can use if you know or think you have extra long names and you're not sure. You can put that length formula in, and then as you correct them and press the enter key, it will recalculate to tell you how many characters it is in that field. And you can put that length formula for any field that you think you might need, which is why you use the import guide to show you what the maximum number of characters is that you can bring in. And then you won't run into issues with things being too long. So that's another little trick to use in preparing your data for importing. Okay, then the last one that I wanted to do is a set of activities. With activities, you're going to need the account name. You're going to need the contact name split into first and last. You'll need the activity type, and the activity type needs to match your activity types that you have defined in Claritysoft. You need the subject, you'll need a start date, and you need a start time. Now this is kind of the bugaboo one, because if you're bringing in activities, especially from another CRM, you're not going to have this start time necessarily. So if you don't have it, it can all be at 8:30 in the morning. Who cares? Okay, it doesn't matter. It's just that the importer has to have a time. So if you don't have a time, make one up, copy it down. All right, and then you also will need a completed time. Use the start time and the completed time the same. Doesn't matter. Again, in this instance, you're kind of playing along with the computer, needing a requirement that doesn't matter to you necessarily. Now, if it's an activity that's out in the future, then the time can become important, but you at least want to capture the date. So that's a trick if you are coming from another CRM and you are required to have this time field, then you can just create one, copy it down, and use that column, okay? So in my instance, I happen to have a time because I actually exported this from an existing database. So I had it there. And then, so you'll need a start date, a start time, a completed date, and a completed time if the activity is completed. Now in this case, this activity is still in process. It shouldn't be because it's from March, but it is. And then you'll have an assigned to, which is equivalent to the owner. Now we have both assigned to and owner. The difference here is the owner would be the person who originally created the activity, but they could have assigned it to another person. So these two could be different. Again, if you're coming from another CRM, probably doesn't matter. You just want to capture that you did the activity, especially if it's an old one. It doesn't necessarily matter. And then this says it's on the calendar. It's true, it's on the calendar, or false, it's not on the calendar. Again, you don't need this necessarily if you're bringing over old activities. One of the things I've discovered too in bringing things from other CRMs, many times they don't have the activity type. They have, you have no idea whether it was an email, a phone call, or anything like that. So what I've done is we've put in history. It's a historical activity from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever. And we just use that activity type for all of them. And then we just create an activity type called named history in Claritysoft, so it recognizes it when it imports, and then it brings it in. And then later we disable that history activity type so people don't see it anymore. But then in the database, they know that anything that's a history type, it came from their old CRM. So just another little trick or idea to think about if that's what a situation that you're in. Okay, so, and then I forgot when I did my exporting, I forgot to export my notes. So if you're exporting your notes, which are most important, then you would have a notes column and you'd have all your notes, and all the text for your notes can also be imported. I realized I forgot to do that. So anyway, we can still go ahead with the import. So I'll go back. Get this done real quick. And this one here, you can only create new records. You can't update activity records. So that's why that's grayed out. So you can see it's the same process. So again, required fields are red. I must have the account. I must have an activity type, which in my spreadsheet is activity. I must have first and last name, which was already there, and I must have a start date. And then there's a start time, the subject, the assigned to can be the assigned to here. The complete date. Now, if you don't have both a start date and a complete date, you can use the same date, but I happen to have a complete date and a complete time. And then you've got an end date and an end time, which is similar. Well, what it is, when you create an activity, you can have a start date and an end date in the activity record. And 99.9% of the time, you're going to do the activity on the same day that you're going to start it. It's due on that day. So you just, here, I'm just going to map start date and start time. And that's just fine, okay? And then is calendar, location, I don't think I have anything in. Like I said, I forgot my notes. There's owner, priority, status, import. Okay. And rush there. So it imported, or it found 502, it imported 491, and it skipped 11. So I'll get my email here in a second to see why it skipped those 11 activities. And then I can go figure it out. There it is. Activity type null or blank validation. So somewhere down in my list at these rows, 493 down in that area, I don't have an activity type in my spreadsheet. So that's why I didn't bring it in. So again, you can see where you can make mistakes. Oh, there they are. See? Those are all blank. No activity type. So it could not bring those in. So you can see it's pretty picky, but that's a good thing because it makes you do it the right way. To close out here, if you need any help with anything, you can call our support line at any time, or you can email them at support@claritysoft.com, and they'll be happy to help you. If you're still in implementation or onboarding with your onboarding person, then you can contact that person and get help with importing. That's usually part of your onboarding process anyway. With that, I thank you for your time, and we'll say goodbye.